10 to 11 में श्योर आ जाऊंगी।
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're audible? So okay.
Yes, ma'am. Audible.
Okay.
Am I audible, ma'am? Devjani, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible. Please go on.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Prachi Polytinka, your host for the 5-day international workshop on research capacity building for early career researchers. I welcome you all to the first day of the workshop. Before we begin, I would request you all to kindly mute yourselves so that we can have a seamless and uninterrupted session. This will help in the clarity of the audio of the speaker. At the end of the session, the queries can be posted in the Zoom box that can be taken up with the resource person at the end of every session. Thank you for your patient hearing. This was just a small instruction in the beginning. Honorable Principal and Chief Patron, Dr. Sister Jyoti. Honorable Vice Principal, Sister Shobha, Honorable Resource Person for the session, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay from Calcutta University, our workshop coordinator, Dr. Devjani Roy, HOD Department of Geography, members of our advisory committee, organizing committee, faculty members of various colleges, universities, research college, scholars, students, and my dear colleagues. Good afternoon once again. On behalf of the organizing team, I extend a warm welcome to the first day of the 5-day international workshop on research capacity building for early career researchers. With the august presence of our principal and chief patron and our esteemed resource person, may I now request our principal, Dr. Sister Jyoti, for her address and her blessings.
Thank you, Prachi. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among his people, sing to him, sing praises to him, tell of all his wonderful deeds. Before we proceed today's rest of the program, let's seek the blessings of the Almighty. Ask him to fill us with his light, love, peace, and his knowledge, so that we become the channel of his light, love, and peace through our knowledge sharing.
There's no sound, Prachi.
Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Oh, Master, grant that I may never see so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's sadness, ever joy.
Yes, let the Almighty make us channel of his peace, love, and light through our very being, through our knowledge sharing. Respected Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, Department of Economics, Calcutta University, the resource person of the day, organizers of 5-day international workshop on research capacity building for early career researchers, Dr. Debjani Roy, HOD, Department of Geography, and her team, Dr. Pinky and Prachi, all faculty members, research scholars, and dear participants. A very warm and blessed good morning, good afternoon to one and all. This 5-day workshop on research capacity building for early career researchers is a unique workshop to enhance research skills amongst young academicians with special focus on gender studies. It is part of our research collaboration with Brunel University, UK, and Savitri Phule University, Pune. We are extremely grateful to these institutions for giving us the opportunity to host this event. The aim of this workshop is to explain the why of research and also to learn how to come up with a research problem. The workshop will also focus on how to identify gender as a research problem so that the research goes beyond a descriptive account of differences into more critical analysis of gender roles and relations. I'm sure this workshop will go a long way in providing fruitful results, as I am told that the participants will have to submit a research proposal at the end of it to display their acquired skills in the workshop. I wish you all the best for your better participation and seek God's blessings. May you have pleasant time and enrich your knowledge. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, sister, for that address and for those words of blessings. May I now request the workshop coordinator, Dr. Debjani Roy, HOD, PG Department of Geography, to kindly introduce our resource person for the session.
Thank you, Prachi. Thank you, sister. Good afternoon to all. It's indeed my privilege to introduce a celebrity and an academician par excellence, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay, to all the members present here today. She's a faculty member in the Department of Economics, Calcutta University, and has more than 35 years of experience. Her areas of specialization are development economics, mathematical economics, labor economics, gender and development. Professor Mukhopadhyay has worked as a former honorary director of Women's Studies Research Center, University of Calcutta. She has been the treasurer and Eastern and Northeastern Regional Coordinator, Indian Association of Women's Studies. She has been the member of Executive Committee, Indian Association of Women's Studies, and as well as the coordinator of Indian Women Entrepreneurship Program, Department of Economics, University of Calcutta. Professor Mukhopadhyay has headed a number of research projects, including Status of Women in West Bengal, which was funded by West Bengal State Commission for Women, the State of Urban Informal Sector and Gender Empowerment in West Bengal as part of a project funded by the Planning Commission of India, the problem of trafficking in Eastern India, which was funded by GAD under British Council in collaboration with London Metropolitan University. She has also worked on the project Incidence of Child Marriage, Dowry and Trafficking in Rural Bengal, funded by Ministry of Social Welfare, Exploration of Poverty and Women's Political Participation in India, Scotland and Malawi, which was again funded by British Council, Health Impact and Access to Safe Drinking Water to Urban Slum Population, which was funded by the Swiss Federal Institute of Science and Technology. Besides this, she has also taken part in Gender and Migration Project in collaboration with CWDS. She was a principal investigator in the Indo-US 21st Century Knowledge Initiative for Promoting Eco-Friendly Entrepreneurship for Women, 2015-19. Professor Ishita is also a well-known author and has authored several books and research articles. It's indeed a privilege that we are having her with us today in this forum to introduce the concept of research in gender to young budding researchers. Once again, I welcome you, Professor Mukhopadhyay, to chair this session.
Thank you for your kind words. I have been only performing my duties. So I don't claim anything for that. So that is my work, my job that I've been doing. Will you share my PowerPoint or will you make me host and I'll share your PowerPoint? Anything can do. I have a PowerPoint here because,
Ma'am, I can share it from my side.
yes. So I'll
Yes,
be
ma'am.
talking
1 minute.
about gender research, and I know this is the first lecture. So yes. So I'll be talking about methodology of gender research. I hope I'm audible. So I'm talking about methodology of gender research. And what is this? Yes, will you just go to the slideshow and share the next slide? Yes.
Prachi,
Now,
can you make it slideshow, please?
yes, I think that is better.
Yeah, then we'll have the entire screen.
Ma'am, is it visible?
It is
It's
visible,
visible.
but you can make it this cup.
Put it on slideshow, Prachi, please.
Ma'am,
Yeah,
I have
slideshow is
put it in
better.
slideshow only, but recently facing.
Okay. Then you can make this cross. You can make this cross so that this will not be
Why, ma'am, in slideshow it is not moving forward. That is what I noticed. So that is the reason.
Okay. Now keep it like that.
Okay, ma'am.
If they can see, then it's okay. So actually, when we are talking about gender studies or the methodology of gender research, which is the objective of this program, this is what is gender studies. Is this a new kind of study? No. This is an understanding. So we can view gender studies as an understanding. What is this understanding based upon? Present status in today's society is unacceptable. That means, from the gender point of view, whatever is happening around us, there is a negation of whatever is happening around us with respect to gender, the position of gender, and there is visible discrimination and oppression. So what is to research is that when we are starting out from this understanding as a knowledge system, we build up a knowledge system, and in this knowledge system, we are to explore the discrimination and oppression. So how is it difficult? This is difficult because this discrimination and oppression is something which is always not visible, and also even if it is visible, it is not documented. So the research is difficult. So that is from our starting point. Gender studies as awareness building. So what is the purpose of this knowledge creation? One of the purpose of this knowledge creation is of building awareness so that discrimination and oppression is confronted to some extent and reduced to some extent. Purpose is to promote interests of oppressed. Obviously, the oppressed and the discriminated, their views are to be promoted. Since the oppressed and discriminated do not build up the knowledge system. So to promote their interests, this kind of knowledge based on gender research methodology will be creating a new knowledge base so that the interests of them will be promoted. driving force is feminism. Feminism is a new way of looking at the things, new philosophy. And let me be very clear at the outset that this doesn't only talk about women and femininity. This looks at oppressed and discriminated in a different knowledge system, in a different ideological setup of the knowledge system. Where is this originated? Where are the learnings coming from? Gender studies as action, meaning it is the learnings from women's movement. So women's movement has a lot to say about it. Please, next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, it is an interdisciplinary studies. Yes, the earlier slide, yes. It is an interdisciplinary study, definitely. So there is the question of power and autonomy. That is, if we talk about the oppressed and discriminated, obviously they are in a different power setup rather than those who are powerful. So the question of power and autonomy and patriarchy is the grounding social structure. Emergence, and from here, the emergence of feminist interpretation of society is there. So this is the new kind of research analysis. This is a new kind of methodology which is being incorporated here and which is emerging from this structure, that you are moving beyond the power relations. We have to move and break the power relations and develop a new knowledge basis against the existing power relations. So it sounds complex, and it is really complex. So methodology of interdisciplinary study is complex. It sounds and it is complex. The research design is complex, as this is based on a different view of the society. So what are the different views of the society? So we move into some different views of the society, and we have to look into the broader feminist theories. And when we are applying the kind of theories that we are trying to apply, our design, our research design, and our methods would be appropriately chosen with respect to these. Next slide, please. So the major propositions are, the first is the distinction between sex and gender. This is now pretty common, that one is a biology, the other is a social. So one is biological, anatomical, and the other is the social. So is the anatomy leading to social? No. Or the social leading to anatomy? No. So actually gender is socially constructed, and the one is the anatomical and biological. There's a difference. There's a difference, meaning what the biology or the anatomy is telling, the society is not telling the same thing. So it is not always a man who is oppressing woman. It's a man oppressing man, woman oppressing woman. It's like that, assuming masculinity and femininity as the two poles of this oppressed, oppressor, discriminated, discriminant relationship. So the power, it's a question of power, and one ends at one pole of the power, the other is the other pole of the power. So distinction is also a contested one in queer studies, which is very common now, and it is of age. It has become popular. It was not popular even decades ago, of looking into the queer studies, where you have we have various forms of gender forms in several levels of oppressions. Social construction and perception of gender roles in the society. And as I'm addressing the first level researchers and who are into this research, so I'm making it a bit technical in that sense, in terms of research in terms of research languages, that when we are building up a concept, and this concept is based on power, I'm basically looking at two different poles, and in the two different poles, what we see is this, that there is a continuity between these poles, and several locations are there between the two poles. So one pole is masculinity and the other pole is femininity. So this is the contested zone that we are trying to look at. So social construction and perception of gender roles in the society, emergence of gender stereotypes. So our design will be with respect to these. Politics and economics of education policy is very important here, pertaining to mind and body. Now, why politics and economics of education policy is very important here? Because education policy is addressing either of these poles and not in the intermediate zone in between, the contested zone in between. So this is very important. Is power imbibed within the education policy, or is power a part of this? Pertaining to mind and body, that is the mind and body two parts of the same thing, two parts? Does it always, are they oriented in the same direction? So these major propositions are required as far as a gender research design is to be there. We have to answer these questions first and then look to the gender design. Next slide, please. Then I'm introducing you to a little bit on the gender studies. So what are gender studies? Distinction between woman and gender. Man, woman and gender, there is a distinction. Gender is of several types, as I have just stated. Understanding status of women vis-a-vis men, because the two poles are to be understood very clearly. Now, the status of women vis-a-vis men, relative positions of women with respect to men, these are to be understood as part of our studies. Study of masculinity, transgender, gay and lesbianism also involved in gender studies. Gender studies particularly focus on gender propensities of human beings. So when we propose a design, these are to be in the background. We have to explain, we have to be very clear with respect to each of these. This is different from women's studies, particularly because women's studies contain gender studies. Does not undermine the importance of women's studies. Why we call them women's studies? Because women's studies based on feminist theory was the first in this field of discrimination, in this study of discrimination and oppressed, who were trying to point out to these major propositions, which are to be incorporated and which are to be incorporated, answered, to offer a layout of design for research as far as gender studies is concerned. So next slide, please. So I'll be going into a little bit of history of women's studies. And if you're trying to look into this history of women's studies, then this will take us to these questions. The next slide, please. Next slide. Prachi, next slide, please. Yes, we move on. Yes, history of women's studies. Women's studies is closely related to women's movement. So as it is a movement of the oppressed and discriminated women. Movement means a struggle. Movement means protest. Movement means actions. So they do not have any research part of it. But women's studies is closely related to women's movement. So what does women's studies do? It gathers information regarding discrimination from the movement, as well as advocate for feminist liberation. feminist theories are built upon women's movement. So this is a learning from the movement, a research from the movement. The design is learned from the movement. So next slide, please. So this is building up feminist theories. Yes. Why feminist theory? What was the objective? Why do you need a feminist theory? Understanding of feminist theory to look into the research in gender studies. Why? Because the objective is to explain subordination. And there are clearly two strands of analysis. One is to formulate universal explanation of oppression by systematic analytical method. This means that universal explanation of oppression, meaning that oppressed and oppressor, there's a clear explanation in many disciplines, and one can take this from the interdisciplinary background by formulating systematic analytical method, by taking cue from the analytical method of the other disciplines. Tries to explain why our human experiences such as marriage, birth, child rearing, wage earnings different in a gendered way. All of these human experiences of living, that is the lived experiences, are getting gendered expressions. Why do they have gendered expression? Why is marriage not the same and is different according to gender? Why is birth, child rearing, wage earning? I gave some examples, but all the experiences of living, all the social experiences of living, political, economic experiences of living, anthropological existence of living, so all of them are having these gendered expressions. Answer questions like who is woman? What is femininity? Is femininity a learned thing or social behavior? What is patriarchy? Why is power associated with masculine and feminine? What is this patriarchy looking into? Sorry. So we have to answer these questions. Where lies the oppression? What is femininity? Is it a learned thing from experience or a social behavior? So what is patriarchy? Why is power associated with masculine and feminine? I told you already about the two poles. So how do you explain the two poles? Can you identify the two poles? If you are not able to identify the two poles, then the design cannot be constructed. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, the main strands of feminist theory. I need to quickly go through the main strands. The first wave of feminism, the first wave came with the right to vote. So the liberal feminism, cultural feminism, Marxist feminism, these were the movement languages. So it depends when you are trying to look into a research design, the theory is at the back of your mind. And feminist theory is not a single focused, only one theory. The explanation is not unique, and the explanation is not the way in which we can visualize a simple world. It's complex. So there are various kinds of theories. And these are the theories that evolved along with the movement. So the movement generated these theories. The second wave of feminism came later, where these theories became popular and these theories evolved. Feminist existentialism, psychoanalytic feminism, social feminism, radical feminism. Many of you are familiar with these, but I just will quickly go through some of the propositions of these theories. That if you have to base the knowledge on one of these theories, we all have to do so. One theoretical footing must be there. That is, these theories looks at the poles in dissimilar ways. It's not that masculinity and femininity are different for these theories. It's not that the distinction between sex and gender is different. It's not biological and social are different. But the structure, but the learnings from the movement, that is the language in which the explanation is made, the way in which the society is explained, this is different. So please, next slide, please. I'll just go through quickly. Other developments are French feminism, Black feminism, postmodernist feminist theory that is based on the standpoint theory. So I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list of all kinds of theories. It's also not true that the evolution of the theories have stopped. There's also social reproduction theory. But knowing the theory is particularly crucial to undertake the gender research. Next slide, please. Next slide, where we'll be talking about liberal feminism. Just give you examples from history. That if this is the theory in which you are trying to base your research, then how do you, what should be your methodology and how should you look into the design? See, in 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women. This very popularly known book. Women's issues seen from the rights perspective. And this was influenced by French Revolution. What was the main proposition? The main proposition was women remain enslaved because of a corrupt process of socialization which stunts their intellect and teaches them that their proper purpose of the life is to serve men. Serve power, basically. Proper education and proper training is key feminist agenda to go out of this. So actually what happens, if you want to base your research based on this rights perspective, where the basic proposition is that women's intellect is stunted. In fact, our education policy also looks at this. And the education policy, if the education policy presumes that the women's intellect is stunted and looking into the dropout females and when the dropout girls, and if we assume that their intellect is stunted, then the books would be different, then the learnings would be different, the courses will be different, but the presumption is being also justified in a lot of literature I have seen that their intellect is stunted intellect. So you have to redefine intellect in a new way, which means that the intellect of the powerless is not stunted and the intellect of the power is greater than the intellect of the powerless. So as they are discriminated, their intellect and their purpose of life is also somewhat hierarchically lower. So we have to free ourselves from all of these hierarchies. And I have to look, it's difficult, it's complex and it's difficult. This I'm telling from the very first time. As is the first lecture, I would also ask you to understand that this is the basic challenge which we all face, that it is complex. Next slide, please. So this is what is our learning from liberal feminism. Yes, next slide, please. All of these theories are giving us some kind of learning as far as the research is concerned. Liberal feminism, Sarah Grimke, who proposes the basic propositions. I'm looking into the basic propositions and then trying to look into the kind of research designs it may it may focus on. Religion is one of the main forces that keep women subjugated. So if this is our proposition, you have to deduce what kind of methodology, what kind of research, what kind of questions will you ask. If this is the supposition from where you proceed, so your questions would be different. You must have this theory at the back of your mind if you're going to work out on this. Women as a class subordinated by men as a class. So this was a contested hypothesis. But if you are trying to look into this, then the research would be automatically, the gender research would be somewhat different from any other kind of research. Then France writes the importance of reason and critical thinking by women. That what kind of critical thinking of women, or what kind of critical thinking by the different contestants in this gender space is there. What is the importance of reason? How do they look at reason? Religion and institutions made women down. Religion and institutions means the way to look at the religion. The way religion and institutions, the norms, the social norms, the religion, how they look into women. It's not that this kind of gender research contests religion. No, definitely not. It doesn't contest religion, but in all circumstances, there are social norms and institutions. And this was what Franz Wright was trying to say, that this is the proposition. If you start from this proposition, then how would you devise a design? So see, each of these propositions are devising, are looking at designs in different way, are generating different kinds of design. Then we have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who starts with the proposition, which is extremely appropriate if we kind of look into our country, that the women's right to vote is a natural right. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton is trying to look into this natural right position. Now, please go to the next slide. And if we look at it as an unnatural right in some countries, then you have to, the proposition is different. Cultural feminism, what are the propositions? And with it, how do you change the methodology and how do you change the space, the knowledge space? Margaret Phule, this was in 1845, women in the 19th century, sorry for the typo. Product of European Romantic movement, stresses emotional, intuitive side of knowledge. So the knowledge is also having an emotional and intuitive side. There is an intuition and there is an emotional and passion part of the knowledge, which is often ignored. It's not only mechanical, it's not only teleological, but it has got a passion and an emotional part of it. That is, you want to find out something and you are passionate about that, because working out for the oppressed, it's also an action. It's an action research also. That makes it an action research. That makes gender research an action research. So it moves into some kind of action. It was there in my initial slide that it also looks into the action, that this knowledge base is looking into action. The women must develop self-reliance. If we move by this, then we move by, if this is the proposition, then the research design should be trying to look for where the oppressed is trying to take over oppressor, where the discriminant is trying to take over discriminant. So how are the relationships between the two poles determined? So if we try to see that one pole will never be taking over the other pole, then the research design will be something else. And if we look into the fact that the one pole will be taking over to the other pole, that this self-reliance is being developed, then we must look into the research design in a different way. Matilda Gage in 1826 and 98. So I'm quoting these from years ago, centuries ago. Women Church and the State uses natural rights theory for biblical ethics. So if you go by biblical ethics, ethical norms, then use the natural rights theory for both the oppressor and the oppressed, and you try to see how these theory is to be accommodated in gender research, and the design is to be developed according to this theory. Birth of the concept of androcentrism. So in the center, you have this bipolar theory that males and females, and androcentrism is the mixture, that is the mixed space all between. And if you look into this setup, this mix-up, this mesh, then the design would be appropriately formulated corresponding to this. It's not that you have a unique gender research design. It's different to the kind of the theory, different to the kind of the proposition, different to the kind of your exploration. Next slide, please. Next slide, where the Marxist theory is explained, the Marxist feminism. Engels' work today is Frederick Engels' 202nd birthday, 202 birthday, and 1884, Frederick Engels wrote Origin of Family, Private Property and State. So this focused on the private property related to origin of family and patriarchy. So that is, when we look into oppression within the family, then we have to look into the inheritance rights, the private property. These comes into a research design. Reinforced by patrilinearity means the inheritance right, the property rights. So women must enter public sphere to communalize the realm of the private production. That is the sexual division of labor, which I'm coming later. So if we go by the Engels framework, then we have to look into the inheritance rights. Then we have to look into the obviously the property rights, and the wealth of the family is a determining factor, and the inheritance, the number of sons and daughters are determining factor. That is, the family is a determining factor. And the origin of family, this was very clearly stated. State also is a part of it, plays a part in this role. So the government cannot interfere in the microcosm of the society, which is a family. Family is a microcosm of the society. So the role of the state is also comes in. State, if the state plays, if the gender research looks into the policy designs, and if these policies are the state policies, then these policies would be obviously looking into the microcosm of the family as a way in which the rights are being exercised, the inheritance rights are being practiced. Families guided by patrilinearity. Then obviously there is the Kate Millett sexual politics, the women's oppression across class, that is all kinds of classes, all kinds of families. You have this, we have this sexual politics, that is, it is the politics of gender. So now you have to reframe the gender design in terms of the politics of gender. Slide please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, Angela Davis, the Black Women's Movement, which is a learning from the movement. And then from this movement, how do you frame your questions, gender research questions, and how do you frame the gender research design? So women's oppression across race, Then women's Maria Dalla Costa, women's subversion of community. So when we look into the women's subversion of the community, then the proposition is that the factory labor is less alienating than domestic labor, as this is collective. So a woman working up, doing the same work in the factory and at home, if we do research on that, their questions and their problems would be different. And the design would be different if we work on women in the domestic space, if we work on any kind of gender in the domestic space and in the other space, that is the public space, that is where the women are collective. It's less alienating. Factory labor is less alienating because there the world is visible to these women. Debate between public sphere and private sphere. Public sphere is where the women are and where all kinds of gender are, where the oppressed is being in a world where the oppressor is visible. But in the domestic space, the oppressor is not visible always. So the oppressor is the system. It's of course the system, the social norms, and the institutions of the system. And the institutions is the oppressor. So this is not visible always. Next slide, please. Next slide. Feminist existentialism. Now, if the framework is feminist existentialism, Simone de Beauvoir, 1949, The Second Sex. Now, why in understanding research design, we need the theory, is that when we are looking at these theories are the philosophy of the research, gender research. So there are differences in ideology, differences in philosophy. So the same phenomenon can be looked upon and explained in various ways by looking at the theories. We do not have a unique and ultimate in knowledge system. And you cannot exhaust also all kinds of queries. Knowledge is not an end by itself. You have to expand. It's an expanding knowledge. Knowledge, you cannot put a full stop to knowledge. You cannot say that this is enough and nothing can be done in this direction. No, knowledge is an expansionary system. So gender research is also an expansionary system. We are unfolding more and more of it as time goes by, historically. As long as we stay, that is the civilization will stay, knowledge system will also stay and expand itself. It's an expansionary system. So Simone de Beauvoir wrote The Second Sex. Proposition of oppressed, failure of women to be subjects. Status of the other, the otherization, that is, you try to search for the others. Where are the others? That is, where are the oppressed? Where are the discriminated? You'll search for it. They cannot transcend their present situation or identify themselves into a group. It was Simone de Beauvoir who stated that women's biology makes them the other. So you cannot revert the other, it's different. So why other? It should be different. So looking into different gender positions, they are different. It's not otherization. It's only one pole as the main pole and the rest is the other. So otherness is different from otherness of proletariat or racial minorities. This is true for matrilineal cultures also. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There is a critique of Simone de Beauvoir also by Mackinnon, which says that This kind of framework did not question the institutionalized patriarchy, it only explained institutionalized patriarchy. But it doesn't question the institutionalized patriarchy. Mitchell stated that the subordination is also a social and economic phenomenon. And Young stated that the devaluation of traditional feminine property. So these are the propositions. So if we look into these propositions, then the proposition is based upon an understanding of the society, an understanding of the gender position of the society. So this understanding is making the design different with respect to the framework. So framework comes from the theory. From the theory, we have the framework. From the framework, we go to the major propositions. From the propositions, we go to the design. Now I come to how, and from the design, the method. Methodology and method are not the same thing. Methodology is talking about the ideology, the framework, and then we go over to the design. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. Psychoanalytic feminism, Sigmund Freud, everybody knows. Developments of women's femininity. The child learns some desires, penal envy, and generation of patriarchy. So if Freudian structure is to be the basis, then the design would be something else. Kate Millett critiqued Freud in proposing biological determinism. So when we talk about the penal envy, it's talking about the biology as supreme. So this was critiqued also. So critique of anatomy is destiny. Anatomy cannot be the destiny. Anatomy cannot decide the social and institutional norm. So Mayer's challenged the basic premises of masculinity and femininity, questioned the poles by itself. So if the research is questioning the polarization per se by itself, then the design would be to look at the origin of these poles and how are the poles being exhibited. Next slide, please. Next slide. Radical feminism. This is part of the New Left movement as a reaction to other theories. So as you know, this is a history of how the knowledge system in these queries, the designs and the gender research has expanded, became diverse. Part of the New Left movement as a reaction to other theories. The slogan is personal is political. So the oppressed feels that this is a personal problem, but it is political. That is the question, the reason why the discrimination, why the oppression is political. So the query and the research is a political questioning, the political. So the design would be, the appropriate design would be the design which helps us to unearth the questions of the political, critique of political. So a critical research, gender research is always a critical research, as these theories have shown us. So the critical research coming out of a critical proposition is to bring out the critique of the system, to understand the critique of the system, and this is the knowledge to be generated. Mackinnon and Dawkins talked about male power. Even if you talk about masculinity and male power, not only understanding the oppressed also means understanding the power, how the power behaves. What are the ways in which power tries to exercise its power? What are the forms of behavior of power relations? So material basis of oppression lies in economics and not in biology. If we are trying to look into the radical feminism, also talked in terms of economy, political, cultural, and also economy in terms of inequality in wages, inequality in earnings, in terms of inequality in inheritance right, property rights, in terms of inequality in assets, acquiring assets, in terms of inequality to access to economic resources. In fact, Amartya Sen and others talked about this human development, gender development. So that is also a basis. So we have this inequality of access, of capability deprivation approach also. This comes up as part of a research design in this. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. The next slide. Women in higher, yes, gender focused method of, yes, no, gender focused, slide 21. Slide 21. So gender focused method of research. Now, this means that the data and information are to be collected so that the vulnerability can be assessed. So if we cannot assess the extent of vulnerability, if we cannot assess the extent and the areas of vulnerability, then the design is not appropriate. So data and information are to be collected so that these are assessed. An assessment can be made. Objective is to reduce biases in research, which hides the discrimination and vulnerability. So there are, the propositions are telling us, so there are biases in the research which hides the discrimination and vulnerability. Gender disaggregated data needs to be there. And if the gender disaggregated data is not there, then we have to look into the ways in which the research can generate this data. Design needs to be weighted by vulnerability. So where the vulnerability is high, the vulnerability is not revealed. So we must have the design so that it reveals what is not revealed. So to bring out, it brings out what is not being brought out. To make visible what is not invisibilized needs both qualitative and quantitative methods. There is no unique way, it's complex. So needs both quantitative and qualitative methods. As I told you that I'll be coming to methods. So even if we go by the quantitative, the interview method, the survey method, the design of the survey needs to be very strong and very articulate. For example, the employment-unemployment survey of the NSSO is sometimes not appropriate to talk about women's contributions, the other contribution of the other genders, the transgenders. Time use survey is yielding us a better result sometimes. So it is not how much is the earning, how much is the work done, but how much time. Time can be an important factor. So sometimes the time use survey yields a better results. For the qualitative, there are lots of methods, qualitative methods. It's also into the language, the how in the if we are looking into understanding a policy paper, if you look into the new a new education policy also, how many times a word comes, it gives us the tone of the basic proposition of this NEP. How many times a word is coming, a word is appearing. There is a particular method to look into that. So then the policy is showing a kind of bias in use of that word. So this can be analyzed and then brought out. Next slide, please. This is a bit on women in higher education. So can the women in higher education who are into research do this? Women historically found it easier to be educated in science than to be successfully employed in it. That's also true. What are the faultiness? What are the faultiness in our society? Where is the social and institutional norms coming up? That you get many PhDs in science, but they not successfully employed. So many people, we have highly educated women, but not successfully employed. That much employment is not matching the education. Margaret Rossetter, 1982, Gold, Merchant and others noted that creation is masculine and then natural as feminine. This is the basic proposition of the social norm or the institutional structure. And contesting this would make us look into the structure in a different way. Fox Keller in 1985 talked about evolution of modern science as evolving particular and the historical ideologies of gender. So modern science as evolving this particular and the historical ideologies of gender. The feminist critique of objectivism. So objectivism will not capture the structure. Subjectivism as well as objectivism is required. So sometimes objectivism is being critiqued. Donna Haraway's study on primates show gendered roots in culture. So this is also something that is to be understood. Sandra Harding's theory of anthropology, social anthropology, theory of subjugated knowledge, that is, that knowledge is also is under subjugation. So this is also trying to look into another kind of research design, that the existing knowledge is subjugated. So how do you go out from this and build up the alternate knowledge system? Next slide, please. Next slide. So the question of biology, it's coming up again and again. It comes up very much in gender research. Sociobiological explanations of race and gender. In the 17th century, questioning nature. In fact, Descartes upset the ideas of separation of body and mind. Body and mind are not separate. It was Descartes who was looking at this. Patriarchal utopia was indicative of the rise of a technological and capitalist society built on supposedly culturally neutral and objective new form of knowledge, but are actually based on sexual politics. The sexual division of labor within household, that is capitalism, is being provided by the sexual division of labor within households. That is, men are for production and women are for reproduction. So men for production and women for reproduction. This is the way in which the sexual division of labor is perpetrated in a capitalist society, and capitalism is looking at this sexual division of labor as the social and institutional norm. So the biology comes in setting up of this. So the difference between biology and social remains, but sometimes the biology is becoming primarily the determining factor. Then the next slide. Next slide, please. Is the gender explained? Was gender ever explained? In mid-17th century, there were different explanations of life and gender. Women's passive nature and intellectual capacities. From this was the starting position. And of course, as if this was the starting position, then there is problematic in this devising the gender structure. So can this research liberate women, educating women, or this biological difference utilized to explain natural social complementarity? So biological, natural, biological, social complementarity is also to be explored. This was in the late 18th century. So there was much experimentation with respect to the gender research design, and these are the structures. Next slide, please. The next slide, the questions on education at present. the gender research question, which needs separate designs, is that do men and women have different attitudes towards choice of instruction and career dreams? Is career and marriage interrelated for both men and women in a similar way? Why do women quit their jobs to marry? Now, when looking at these researches, these are just examples, because if you have questions on education at present, and if you are looking at the new educational policy in the backdrop of these questions, do men and women have different attitudes in these choices? So if they start from different premises and different attitudes, if the different kinds of gender in the queer studies, they look at different with different attitudes and career dreams. And if you are having a design which looks into identity of all of these as far as the starting position is concerned, then we are making a mistake. So leaving this mistake, these questions are there. Why do you have more NRI grooms than brides? So this is also a question. And if we have these answers based on different frameworks, then we are not moving into a unique research design. Sometimes it is difficult to look into a unique one research design, but we have to solve this complex problem altogether. Do they have different kinds of conversations, dreams, responsibilities, worries in their everyday life? What are the experiences? What are the lives? So these, our propositions will come from simple questions from this, like this. This is a question. These are some of the examples and questions from where we come up with simple questions, but with complex structures. Please stop the slideshow and then let me share something with you. Please stop the slideshow. Yes. Now, so then we learned that the premises are different, and different research can come out, different gender research can come out with different premises. And if we come out from different premises, then we have different methodologies, different frameworks. These frameworks will tell about the different methods. What are these methods? Which method is appropriate? So these methods now give me the research design. So this is the whole complexity from where we come from, and these complexities will settle down after the research is being answered, but the knowledge base is to be developed continuously, and it's a continuous query. So I think I stop here and discuss the questions, and I open the floor to questions. Is this okay? Is this okay for you? Debjani, is this okay?
Yes, yes, perfectly, Ishita ma'am. It was really you initiated the thought process, and I know it's a bit heavy for the beginners, but then your simple way of saying such a big thing in a very lucid manner, I think has ignited some interest in students. You see, we don't have people coming from gender, we are having different a mixed bag, and the very fact that we are trying to link it with our education new education policy, and the hint that you gave that the occurrence of a particular word, I mean, that can also be a study. It's so interesting.
Yes.
And ma'am, I just want to share with you that we in this state of Jharkhand, especially in our institution, we face a major problem of dropouts because of early marriage. So that's a big problem, and we deal with it. And no amount of counseling, no amount of calling the parents and making them understand. Somehow or the other, at the back of the mind, the dowry and the financial burden is so high on the parent that they stop the child's education midway. and unfortunately the child is not able to cope up. We don't know what this new education policy will bring, but so far we have not had many people in the STEM. We have not had many. More of the students opt for English honors, go for humanities, and as you rightly said, there are PhDs, but there are no, employment after that. So it was really very interesting. I'm sure a lot of questions will crop up in the minds of the listeners, participants. As of now, we have a question. I think
Yes.
either Pinky or Prachi can take up the question.
Yes, what is the difference between gender equity, gender equality, and women empowerment? Yes, these are the policy words which are used. And if we look at these policy words, gender equity is a policy word which is not only equality, but equity with respect. When we talk about equality, there is a dimension to this. That in what dimension we want this equal status. So there is equality would mean a kind of a state attained, that a state attained in terms of wages, in terms of land acquired, in terms of housing, in terms of morbidity, in terms of everything. So gender equal, that is, there is no difference between the gender, no intergender, intragender differences. So this is equality. But when we talk about equity, is much something greater than that. Equity is a state where you have the developing system, the system generates equity. That is an equitable situation. That is, whatever exists and whatever will exist, whatever can be formed out of this will be equitable. And empowerment. Empowerment is in terms of certain indicators, that is the status in which the women were there is not after empowerment. There are some indicators, there are indices also to measure, there are quantitative indices to measure these empowerments, and these are in case of all kinds of empowerments, mainly in terms of decision making. This micro empowerment is in terms of decision making, but in the macro sense, that is in the national level, this is in terms of number of elected, number of political empowerment, that is number of seats elected, women elected, number of seats where women are elected, then administrative empowerment, how many women are leading CEOs like that, administrative ladder, who are going up to the administrative ladder, and the economic empowerment, that is based on the earnings. So there are three dimensions of gender empowerment, which the UNDP has talked about it post Beijing conference in 1995. But the equality is some inequality is the later index which the United Nations has selected from 2010 onwards, looked into the inequality index more than the empowerment index. So I think this explains. Is there anything more? Then they can unmute and they can also ask questions. They can unmute.
Our participants are requested to kindly unmute themselves, and if they have any queries, they can post it to our resource person.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
How do we gather secondary data from different institutions, and how do we analyze them?
Yes. The secondary data is not collected sometimes according to the research queries, but we have to rearrange the secondary data in terms of the research question, in terms of the way in which we look at this research questions, the unit level queries, the questionnaire box has to be looked upon, and then interconnections between these interlinkages, then um, these are to be brought out in the different way in which the questions were being put. The answers are there, but you can choose those answers which reveal the interconnectedness. Uh, so this interconnectedness is something which is crucial for gender analysis. Suppose you want to look for uh, the rights of women in a poor household which is deprived of land rights and who lives in the mining area. So you just cull out the data with respect to these and take particular, you can arrive at your attempted special data and then try to compare it with otherwise. So you have to rearrange and cull out the data according to the research design. So you design your questions accordingly and then cull out this data. You have to rearrange the secondary data, not the way in which it is offered to you. Mostly you have to go to the unit level data. Does this reply?
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
Yes, there is another question, up to which extent we can justify the colonization of matriarchy by the patriarchy as a colonizer at present. Please explain in terms of colonization, colonizer and colonized. Yes, the matriarchy doesn't exist, matrilinearity exists. Colonizer and colonized, yes. It is the same as the way in which the questions of power are related, the oppressor and the oppressed. So what happens is this, we can justify. It is not a question. The research is not there to justify anything, or research is not there to justify any kind of statements or positions. Research brings out. So the relationship between colonizer and colonized, the relationship in terms of this, the changing relationships are to be revealed in terms of the research design. Does that answer? Does that answer to your question, Sudeep Eka?
Sudeep, can we
Yes.
unmute? Can you unmute yourself and answer what ma'am is asking? Like, does this suffice?
He's answered yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Thank you so much, Ishita ma'am, for this such an insightful lecture on why there should be study on gender. And you also talked about the various kinds of feminism and the pertinent questions that need to be raised. I would like to now request Dr. Pinky Pandey to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, please. You're audible.
I am Dr. Pinky Pandey, and I consider it a great privilege to propose this vote of thanks to our resource person of the day, Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your precious time. Ma'am, you gave an introduction of gender studies and also talked about the distinction between sex and gender. You also gave an insight into women studies as well as feminist theory. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to our principal, Reverend Sister, Dr. Sister Jyoti, for always supporting all our endeavors. I would also like to thank our Vice Principal, Dr. Sister Shobha, My sincere gratitude to our workshop coordinator, Dr. Debjani Roy, for taking this initiative. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to thank the participants for their enthusiastic participation and asking questions. We have successfully completed our first day of the 5-day workshop, and I hope to see you all for tomorrow's session as well. Thank you.
Thank you
Ma'am,
all
the link
also.
has been posted. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Ma'am, the
sir.
link for the attendance and the feedback has been posted in the chat box. I would request all the participants to go through the same and kindly fill up the attendance. It is, yes, ma'am?
Yes, no, I saw somewhere. It's not, it's thank you. Okay, thanks to you all.
Yes, ma'am.
Listening and also raising questions. They were very good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I can leave.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, ma'am. And for the participants, may we remind you that you have to write a proposal at the end of this 5-day workshop because it's an outcome-based workshop. Simply attending the workshop will not help. Please try to develop a research question, and as you are being guided, please try to form a research proposal, and there are cash prizes after that. So once you finish with this, you can go ahead and you can, of course, you can participate and put forward a research project, even if it's a small project, and you will be given a cash prize. So please don't miss this opportunity. If you're already working on a research, see if it can generate some question. If you're not working on anything, then as you move through this 5-day workshop, please, all of you, it's up to you to generate a question and come up with a research question, a design, and then finally win a cash prize. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, there is one more thing that I would like to,
yes, please,
to add. It's a small request to all the participants to kindly join on time because we'll be starting our everyday sessions promptly at 3 p.m. So today I saw that a lot of you are joining quite late. I don't want anybody to miss something important. So please be on time for tomorrow's session. The link will be open from 2:45. You can start joining in from 2:45. Thank you, everyone. And the attendance form is present over here. Fill in the attendance form because 5-day attendance is mandatory, as it was already stated. Thank you. See you all tomorrow. Okay, ma'am.
Thank you.